Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alex Taylor, and I'm a licensed prayer practitioner at Light on the Mountains. And hello, live streamers. Let's take a moment to go within. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes and feel connected to the earth, connected to your seat, and just feel that grounding presence from the earth's energy. And take a moment from this place of groundedness to embrace the gratitude of this new morning, the opportunities and the possibilities that this time together offers, as well as this brand new Sunday. We are so blessed to be in community with one another and in our sanctuary in this festive holiday time. And I give thanks for the live streamer today that makes it possible for people to watch today, throughout the week, throughout the year, and Reverend John's message, R.L. and Max's music, the children. We are so blessed to have this morning. As together we say, and so it is. And I had a wonderful afternoon yesterday. Some people from Light on the Mountains were there. The Haley Library did making origami peace cranes. And so their goal is to make 1,000 by December 18th. And then they're going to hang them up in the library on December 21st for about a month. So if anyone wants to participate, they are no longer having the official, get-togethers, but you can go and buy your origami paper and look at a YouTube. But it was really nice. And there was about 35 people there. And kids were there, families were there, grandmothers were there, going to show their grandkids how to make the cranes. And they went around the room, and each person had the opportunity to say why they were there. And it was just everybody was there for peace and for our community and the world. And it was so touching. So I was thinking a lot about peace. And I selected a reading this morning from Living the Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, who was our founder. And the name of it, they're essays, actually. And this one is called The Peace That Is Within You. God is peace. This peace which God is belongs to you and is some part of your spiritual nature. The nature of God is incarnated in every living soul. The peace that is within you is not something separate from God. It is not something that bombards you from without. This peace is something that expands from within. Always this peace has been in you. Always this peace has nestled at the center of your being, ready to reveal its perfection and its harmony. Peace stands at the door of your consciousness and awaits your acceptance of it. It does not stand outside waiting for entrance. It stands inside waiting to be expressed in everything that you do. If the possibility of your peace were dependent upon some external event, some outside circumstance, some objective fact, then you would not have the principle of peace within you. You would merely be hoping that one might either develop or be imposed externally. Because this peace is within you, it is available always. If it were somewhere else, you would never find it. Act as though this peace already possessed your soul, and it will possess it. Act as though peace already emanated from your spirit, and it will emanate from your spirit. Speak peace into confusion, and your peace will heal that confusion. This healing power is to be used and not just believed in. There is a vast difference between believing in this principle and using it. To believe in it and understand, to believe in and understand this principle is essential to the use of it. How, then, shall you use this great gift which nestles at the very center of your being? You are to use it consciously. You are to speak the word of peace whenever discord appears. And when you speak the word of peace, let no doubt arise in your thought. You must know that peace stills the tempest. You must know that your peace has all power, because it is the peace of God that is within you. Above the wind and higher than the whirlwind, enshrined in the heart of God, there is a voice within you which says, "Peace, be not afraid, it is I. This I is you. This you is God within you. This God within you is peace." So together we're going to say today's affirmation, which is on your insert near the top in red. And we'll say it together. I embrace the consciousness of positive change and transformation, knowing it contributes to the greater good of all. Max.
Good morning, everyone. It is nice to be back in this space. I've traveled around for the last few weeks, last week being in Maryland, and last Saturday, as you remember, it really snowed. That's the day I chose to fly out of here. It was not easy. Flights delayed, connecting flights rebooked just in time to find out original flight canceled. But I was still sitting in the airport. Couldn't leave because TSA had closed, so if I left the airport, I couldn't get back in. But there's still a Delta flight that might make it in, so I have my eye on it. So I'm working on it. And so I spent lots of time talking to lots of different people at airlines. Because if someone said, "Oh, no, you can't do that," I would say things like, "Oh, no, wait, they're making some announcements here. I have to go. Sorry, I'll call back." And I'd hang up and call back and look for someone else until my friend Sasha was very helpful. And the gentleman who was sitting next to me for the hours of this process said to me, "You've been nice to everyone on the phone." And I said, "I'm being very selfish. I want what I want." End of the story. United flight canceled. Delta flight did come in. I was rebooked on the Delta flight. I made it to Salt Lake that night. I flew from Salt Lake to New York overnight. I had breakfast in New York, and I made it to Maryland at 9:30, and my rehearsal there wasn't until 11. Sometimes it pays to be nice to the people around you. Now, let me change that. I think it always pays to be nice. So I want to read you something. This has been floating around out on social media. And in this, it just went away. Wait, come back. Come back. There we are. This has been floating around, and many of you may have read this, and it's especially appropriate in this season of light. It says this. It's a quote by L.R. Nost. It says, "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break. And all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go. Love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world awaits in darkness for the light that is you." Now, I believe I have my own light. I bring my light out into the world in my own ways, hopefully by being nice on the phone to travel people who might get me where I want to go. While I was in Texas, I drove for about 45 minutes to go pick up someone who was in the hospital who I didn't really know. But he needed a ride, and I was doing nothing. And nobody seemed to be able to go pick him up. I'm like, I can. Why not? I had nothing else to do. It was great. He got to get out of the hospital just after Thanksgiving, unfortunately, but still. But I would challenge you to take a moment in these next days to look at your light, to define it, to discover what is special and unique and very you about your light, and then set about using it in your way, doing the things that let your light shine. And they're not going to be like your friends or your neighbors or your partners or your kids or anybody else. It's your light, and it shines in a very specific way. And I do believe that in shining that light, we start to take care of the brokenness in the world. And I also believe that by shining our lights, we do some really good things for ourselves. I think sharing that light is part of finding abundance in our own lives. of finding things to be grateful for. And isn't that what this season's all about? It's the balance of giving and receiving, acknowledging that both are part of the exchange. And if you only think about the giving and not the receiving, that falls out of balance. And if you only think about the receiving and not the giving, that falls out of balance. And I think nature has taught us really beautifully that balance is what it's all about.
Thank you, R.L. Thank you, Max. Nice having the A team come back. Not that we had the B team. It was really quite wonderful. Thank you. And hello to everyone at home. Just acknowledging that as the roads get slickier, our home audience gets larger. So we just want to welcome you and acknowledge you all out there. We usually know how many of you are out there. We just don't know who you are out there. So happy Hanukkah for those who follow that tradition. And we're going to talk about Hanukkah in a little bit, but I want to set it up and to realize that with any of the stories of the season, there is a surface story and there's many layers of the story to go into. And thinking about this Hanukkah story a bit differently, and again, not to take away from its historic value, but the Christmas story and the Hanukkah story always have deeper ways for us to go. We're going to go there. So it may seem like I'm not going to get there as I start off, but I am, I promise. So I had a wonderful phone conversation with someone many of you or some of you may remember in the period that we call BP, before pandemic, when it was a somewhat different world. So who remembers one of our, we had as a guest here twice as a workshop presenter and vocalist, Nicholson, oh, I'm sorry. See, I just drew a blank. Esther Nicholson. You remember her? If you saw her, you can't not remember her. She's amazing. She has an amazing presence, and she's a wonderful vocalist. Both times she gave workshops on Monday night, probably the most well-attended workshops we've ever had. So to get like 40 to 50 people out on a Monday night, like I said, people, if you want to go somewhere, you make it. And it was just really this wonderful event. And so we talked about the work that she's doing now. When she first contacted me, I thought she was kind of doing something similar, but it is a bit different. So she has created a 10-hour class workshop on diversity and facing our own inner biases. And that sounds like I want to go, but I'm almost afraid to go kind of thing. And as we talked about it, it's so amazing how, talking about the world today in our country, and how it seems like there is an explosion of conflict. And as we were working through this, just this belief and possibility that it's like pulling the Band-Aid off a wound. It's like bringing everything to the surface to be looked at, dealt with, and hopefully healed. And the experience that I have had, I don't know if you've heard this term before, but it's like people are saying the quiet part out loud, meaning people, when we have quiet biases, I don't want to admit that I'm racist, but now willing to state it out loud, or willing to state of any bias of that someone is different, that to claim publicly that that's not okay. And it's very disconcerting, obviously. But I believe it comes up for a reason, and her 10-hour, I don't even call it, experience event is designed to look at that. And she said in a very loving and compassionate way. So you can't, as she said, you can't do it in blame and shame, even with that directed at yourself. And she said as a black woman, sometimes it's like, white people are bad for doing this. This is not about shame or putting it on anyone. It's like, let's just honestly let this come up and see if we can go forward in healing. So we're going to consider having her come do that. And if anyone is interested in that kind of commitment, let me know, because the Leadership Council, because it's quite a financial commitment for us and for you in a bit. There is a tuition. It probably, we have no idea what it would be, but it'd be somewhere like $200-ish for that. So I just want you to So even at home, because those at home, we discussed the possibility of having it on live stream, and we have a new way of live streaming that you can register, so it's just not open forum, you have to sign up. So at home, if that sounds compelling, and here, it will give us information as we talk about this possibility when we come to our board meeting this week. I think it would be a great thing, but it's got to feel like it's the thing. I mean, I don't know about you, but it sounds exciting and like scary at the same time, doesn't it? You know, stew with that and let us know either email or afterwards. I think it could be a good thing. So how does this lead to Hanukkah? Well, I believe, as I was really being with the story of Hanukkah, that it's a story of a longing to come back to wholeness. But let me read the Wikipedia two-line sentences, because I'm not about how it places Hanukkah and where it came from. It says, Hanukkah is an 8-day religious observance commemorating the recovery of Jerusalem and subsequent rededication of the Second Temple at the beginning of the Maccabean revolt against, I can't pronounce this word, empire, in the 2nd century BCE. So as I was looking at this, the lovely story we tell is it's a festival of light. We look at something that we think could be the miraculous. Something amazing happened. And it just really hit me that this story came out of an end of a war. And as we all know, there is war conflict going on in the Middle East now. And how could there be a search for wholeness now as there was for then? And how, as human beings, do we need to look a little bit more deeply of what wholeness means? Again, often we see wholeness as not just including, but we see it as excluding. And that's just the truth of it. How many times have you, like me, I've heard people in the media saying, we need to, they don't use the word wholeness, get back to who we were, and they talk about life in the United States in the 1950s like it was an I Love Lucy episode. It was not. In fact, it was the big setup for the civil rights movement that came out of the 50s and into the 60s. So it wasn't like all love and light, as they say. Serious things were happening. And again, that's, I think, an example of how we want to go back to wholeness, but we think of it in terms of excluding instead of including. And wholeness, and we don't like to think of this, it includes everything. Even the people you see on TV, on the news, that you throw your shoe at the TV set. It includes those people. It includes the people that, again, you hear and your blood pressure goes up. It includes that. It's not about excluding them. It's about how do we bring it all together. It's about setting a larger table, not removing chairs from the table. And that's the difficult thing it is as human beings to understand, because how many times in our lives, regardless if it's a big thing or a small thing, do we think it would be so great if we could just get rid of this piece? Or that one person that I go like this, that I see in Atkinson's, if I could just get rid of them or not have them in my life, life would be an experience of wholeness. But it never really turns out that way. So let's look at the Hanukkah story and coming back to wholeness and how, I guess, war worked in those days. So when you went to war at those days, in ancient times, let's say, it was seen that you were not just going to war with a people or a nation. It was your God going at war with their God. And whoever won in their minds was proof that that God was stronger. So one thing that you would do as, to show respect to your God that just helped you win the war is that in this territory that you took over, you would go into any religious sites, temples, and you would rededicate it to your God, because it's like, we won. Well, let's get rid of the old God, because obviously he, she, it, or whatever it was, lost the war. So in a sense, when it says here that there was a rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, it had been taken over by someone else. dedicated to their God, and it was now time to rededicate it to the Jewish God. I don't know if you ever got that before. So the supposed miracle of Hanukkah is that this rededication process supposedly took several days, and you needed a special oil that was blessed in a way that I'm not clear how that worked, in a process to light candles with this oil over several days, but there wasn't enough oil. There was enough oil to burn for one day. And it wasn't like instant oil where you just kind of like, do the blessing and you're good to go. There was a process to create this oil that took time. So the miracle of Hanukkah was that they said, well, we're going to just do this anyway. Light candles using that oil, supposedly having 1 day supply, and it miraculously lasted for 7 days. So that is the celebration of the supposed miracle that something amazing happened. And it came out of, in my opinion, a desire to move back to wholeness. Let's rededicate this temple, but still, and nothing against the Jewish faith or any of us, because we all do this, there was still an aspect of we need to exclude something to be whole. We have to get rid of the old God and the observances and bring in the one here. And again, we all do that on some level. And I think to look into the story more deeply to realize, you know what? This never works out well, does it? Like I said, today's winner is tomorrow's loser. How many times in the ancient world, I'm just imagining as wars were fought and won and fought and won, that different temple sites were like going back and forth with different dedications to different gods of different peoples, that, again, you may have your day-to-day, but eventually the tide's going to turn until we begin to get the lesson of what wholeness really means. And I think that the reason why the Hanukkah story was on my mind so much this year, even though it's not the culture of my upbringing, of course, is the war that's going on in the Middle East now. What is interesting about that, there's something about that area of the world that most of us in the West just have this, connection with. It's funny how Christians, Jews, and Islam all see that as their holy site. And there's all three struggling, thinking if we could only get the other two out of here, it would be just great. Isn't that kind of interesting? Like we are the holiest of holies, and if we could just get rid of the other two. And I'm saying at any time it's any one of them saying get rid of the other two. And so it's kind of like this cultural apex of struggle and conflict that for many generations in some form or another affects us all. So we can take it even unconsciously at a very personal level. So, boy, if we could if we could get to wholeness in that part of the world, the reverberations would be worldwide. But the sad thing is that we have trouble sometimes getting that sense of wholeness in our own households, in our own communities. And we might, in a very judgmental way, say, why don't those people in the Middle East just pull it together? And we can't even talk to our next door neighbor sometimes. And so as I was contemplating this, I came across the work of Rabbi Sharon Brous. And I have an excerpt here from an interview, a podcast that she had with Ezra. What is his name? Yes, Ezra Klein, who I just love. And this is, I found the audio as well online. You can go to this. If anyone want it, just email me and I'll send you the link to this. And so let me just give you a mini biography of Rabbi Sharon Brous so you kind of know who she is, since I'm just getting to know her. It says, Rabbi Sharon Brous is the senior and founding rabbi of ICAR, a leading-edge Jewish community based in Los Angeles. She is a leading voice in reanimating religious life in America, working to develop a spiritual roadmap for a soulful, justice-driven, multi-faith ethos in Los Angeles and around the country. And she is coming out with a new book she wrote on the 9th. It's not that I'm here to plug her or anyone else's book, but I can't wait to read this book. It's called The Amen Effect, Ancient Wisdom to Mend Our Broken Hearts and World. And a little blurb that was written on Amazon about that says, Browse contends that it is through honoring our most basic human instinct, the yearning for real connection, that we reawaken our shared humanity and begin to heal. I think we all need to read this book, and I think we all need to read it together. So after the new year, we're going to jump back into this, because this is, and she's going, I don't know if I can say this, she's going to be at the Writers' Conference this year, and anything that's on the pavilion is live streamed for free. You have no excuse not to be exposed to her. But let me read this excerpt from this interview, because I think she has, I don't know, the ability to speak about the Israeli-Palestine situation far more than I could ever pretend to. She says, for the past many years, Israeli Jews and Palestinian citizens of Israel and Palestinians living in the West Bank who have lost loved ones in their immediate family, they have formed an organization where they come together to share their grief. And for the past several years, they have met on Israel's Day of Remembrance. This is a really sad day in Israel. The whole country essentially stops in order to grieve those people who've died since the founding of the state, whether serving in the Israeli Defense Forces or through acts of terror or other acts of violence. And the idea behind this joint commemoration is that we are going to live as neighbors. If we are going to live as neighbors, we have to learn how to share our grief so that we can collectively build a shared society and a shared future. And to think, these are the people in this conflict who have lost the most. And they are willing to stand together and to offer their stories as a testament not only to what they've lost, but to what they hope can be recovered, which is some kind of shared sense of humanity, even from the depths of darkness. What happened this year, and for several years, it's been extremely controversial because many people in Israel feel that this is a sacred day to honor Jewish pain and not a time to be building bridges with Palestinian neighbors. But this past year's, the protests were worse than they had ever been before. Thousands of people gathered together in Tel Aviv for this joint forum, and there were protests who were outside who were honking horns and screaming and protesting, doing everything they could essentially to drown out the words of the speakers. And this is particularly heartbreaking because what you have is Palestinians who are standing up in this forum and Israeli Jews standing up to share the stories of the death of their loved ones and how their hearts are shattered and how even still they hold the hope of a better future. I just found this amazing. That it would be controversial to say, let's come together and at least begin to share in our grief. And I think that she may be, the whole Remembrance Day, that might be the place to start. The one thing that when we look at the history of war or conflict, and even with our country, even though we don't like to admit it, one thing that countries try to do is make the other side inhuman. Look back to World War II, World War I. There's all sorts of propaganda against those that we are at war with to make us as Americans feel like they were less than human and they deserved to be taken off the face of the earth. The amazing thing with this is coming together is saying we are all human, we have all experienced loss, and can we begin from here to say or admit the futility in loss? That can be, I think, starting in grief can be a way to begin. And even now as I view, on screen of what's going on now, I see that as well. There appears to be on, I hate to even say both sides, the desire to make the other side look inhuman in some way. That eradicating them is okay because they're not quite us. So that's why I say when I look at this conflict or any other conflict, I refuse to take a side. In fact, it was so interesting. I've seen a few times posted on social media that were shared. It said, if you are going to a church service tomorrow where they don't talk about the Palestinian-Israeli war, you need to go to a different church or synagogue. But there's always this thread that if you don't have the same opinion as the poster, and if that opinion is not shared, you're going to the wrong spot. So, and even just going on Facebook, there is this thread of, oh, there's a group of people that aren't quite wholeness, and you need to take a stand against those people, as opposed to realizing it's a big old mess all the way around. And can we come together, at least beginning in, it is a big old mess? Can we admit that on our level of humanness and even getting away from blame and shame and saying, let's start this as step one? And I think we can use that lesson of wholeness in every layer of our own lives as well. Where can I step forward and someone that I have a conflict with, that I can be in their shoes? And again, not to condone bad behavior, but to see it's not about excluding, but it's how do you bring everyone into the fold somehow? And it's not easy. I mean, we have these ideas of the stories of Christmas and Hanukkah, these larger ideas of amazing things happen, but these stories, when they're told, they have a way of stepping back from history of the real challenges. It's not about a God out there waving a magic wand. The magic is when our hearts change. That's the magic. That's the miracle. That's the festival and season of light, is when our hearts change, even when our hearts are breaking. That's the miracle. So we would love, again, a supreme being with the conflict to just go wave a magic wand and the right things happen, but it's not. The miracle is dependent on us. And once you are truly on board with wholeness, there's the other aspect of Hanukkah, the miracle of the lights. I like the fact that they said this is so important, or wholeness is so important, even though we can't see the resources for this to happen, we're going to begin anyway. And I see a corollary in the Christian Bible of the story of the loaves and the fishes. And for those of you who were quasi-Christian growing up, let me remind you of that. Big crowd. What's for lunch? Oh, we've got like 3 fishes and a loaf of bread. Well, that's not going to work. And so the supposed miracle of that is, let's just start handing out food and see what happens. And in that, there was enough to feed everyone. Same thing. As in the light, as in the loaves of fishes, we start off with the belief and the appearance that there's not enough. Let's not even begin. There's not enough. Like, well, we don't have enough people on board for peace in the Middle East yet, so maybe we should just collect signatures until we have enough signatures. Or, I won't have people in my house until I buy the groceries. I actually think that's a good idea. But generally, but to step forward anyway says, I don't know how this is going to come, but if we don't take the first step, it's never going to happen. Or as a friend of mine says, well, how do you start a center of spiritual living? You have to start with a minimum of 50 people to have a charter. And he said, have you ever just 50 people around the street corner and they said, gee, let's start a center? No, there's work that goes into it. You have steps and you say, we're going to do this. We feel called to do this. And you take those steps even though you don't see the resources in front of you. And to me, that is the miracle, that somehow more oil showed up, somehow more lunch showed up. And we don't know how that happened, but it was the belief of our inner resources that we could look somewhere where we've not yet looked. Or have I shared with you that my prayer almost exclusively is, please, Spirit, help me see the open door that I've been blind to. And I think that's what is in anything and everything. There is a way through that we are currently blind to. And sometimes it's a lot more difficult to see those open doors than others. And I don't believe the miracle, again, of Hanukkah or Christmas is that there will be choirs of angels and shepherds roaming down the streets and amazing things happen. The amazing thing will be that we will get over ourselves and open our hearts to something bigger. That's what the miracle is dependent on. So let's just take this within for a moment. And let us accept wholeness and the presence of Spirit, the divine, in the universe, that it includes everything. It includes that which I'm not comfortable with. It includes that which drives me absolutely nuts. It includes everything. And let us affirm this holiday season that we are not pulling chairs from the table, but we are setting a larger table. A table with chairs with no end. On a human level, it may be difficult, but we open our hearts and minds to the miraculous, that our hearts and minds can actually open and accept something new. So I give thanks for this from the bottom of my heart. And as I give thanks, I take this statement, this affirmation, and release it. I release it into the creative medium of the universe. I know that if I fervently release it, it is created and returned to all of us in amazing ways. And so it is.